We think of the Ottoman Empire as speaking Turkish, but that's only a third of the story. Turkish was of course the main language, but in the Ottoman courts, you might have more often heard people speaking Persian. On top of that, as an Islamic empire, Arabic was the main religious and legal language. Even then, the diverse peoples under Ottoman rule still kept speaking their own native languages, be it Greek, Arabic, Georgian, Bulgarian, Ladino, or any other language from this general part of the world. So how did the Ottomans manage an empire where people spoke all these different languages? Why didn't they standardize everything into one language like the Romans did with Latin? And what does this reveal about how empires, Ottoman or otherwise, actually work? This video is brought to you by Storyblocks. So first, why did the Ottoman government speak 3 different languages? From 3 different families, in fact. Couldn't they have made things work with one language, like basically every other major empire in history? The Ottoman Empire began in the year 1299, but the answer to why it spoke 3 languages goes even further back, and a little bit this way. There we go. In the 11th century, the Seljuk Empire took over Persia and much of the rest of the Middle East, including a big chunk of Anatolia. Just like the Ottomans who would come after, the Seljuks rulers were always Turkic, having come down from Central Asia, and yet the official language of the court and the lingua franca of the wider empire remained Persian. Part of this was practical, sure, what with most of the people in their empire speaking the Indo-European language. Easier for the ruling class to learn the local language than to have millions of people try to learn your language, at least if you want to actually remain in power. But the other thing here is that Persian had been something of a prestige language. Persia's millennial-old culture and literary tradition would heavily influence their Turkic rulers, absorbing Persian culture like a sponge. Most of Central Asia had already been Islamized by this point, while Persia had become Islamic far earlier. The Seljuks worked to fit themselves into this framework, with their rulers even calling themselves the Shahanshah of Islam, while also adding their own native Turkic elements into this tradition. The Seljuk Empire wouldn't last long, however, being pushed into Anatolia and later breaking off into several small kingdoms known as beyliks. By the 15th century, one of these beyliks would become the most powerful in Anatolia and establish an empire that would spread from the Danube to Kuwait. The Empire of Osman, or who we call the Ottomans. The funny thing is, if I were to tell you about a powerful Islamic empire with a Turkic language-speaking elite who used Persian as the language of government and reached their height in the 16th to 18th centuries, you might say, which one? As that sentence can also describe Safavid Iran and the Mughal Empire. The Ottomans called their trilingual system alsina-i thalatha, from an Arabic term meaning the 3 tongues. Arabic was of course the religious language of the empire, which later also became a caliphate after they took over Mecca, and as such also became just as important as a legal language. The Ottoman legal system was based on the Hanafi school of thought, giving them a 5% discount in admin tech. As the largest school of Islamic legal thought, or mazhab, this gave the Ottomans a huge back catalog of legal texts, just all in Arabic. Many of these documents were of course translated into Turkish, but many Ottoman jurists also began to write new constitutional works in Arabic. If Arabic was the religious and legal language of the empire, Persian carried on from the Seljuk days as the prestige language, used in literature and within the walls of Topkapi Palace. This sort of thing wasn't unique to the Ottomans. In ancient Rome, the educated elite were expected to speak Greek as well as Latin, though this was limited to the wealthy, which explains why you're just as unlikely to find Greek-speaking communities in Spain as you are to find Persian-speaking communities in Western Turkey, regardless of what the situation looked like before Rome. Similar thing with French among the Romanovs of Russia, or Sumerian among the Akkadians, or High Valyrian among the Targaryens of Westeros. As the centuries went on though, Persian slowly fell out of use in administration, in favor of Arabic and Turkish. However, Persian found another way to live on in the empire's later centuries. I talk more about how Ottoman Turkish became modern Turkish in this video, but essentially the main differences between the two are the writing system and the fact that as much as 88% of Ottoman Turkish's vocabulary came from Persian and Arabic. It's kind of like what English does with French, Latin, and Greek, but turbocharged. By the 19th century, this mishmash made Ottoman Turkish this crazy complicated mess of a bureaucratic language, said to be only truly understandable within arm's reach of a dictionary. The actual Turkish citizens of the empire, of course, would not have spoken this dialect, rather a similar and simpler dialect known as Kaba or Vulgar Turkish. Of course, the Ottomans wouldn't be confined to their part of Anatolia forever, as they would eventually span across most of the Balkans, the Middle East, and Northern Africa. Spoilers if you aren't caught up on that part of history, I guess. Building an empire where different people also spoke Greek, Arabic, Kurdish, Armenian, what linguists call Serbo-Croatian, Romanian, Tatar, Hungarian, Albanian, Georgian, Nubian, Ladino, and many others. So does this mean that the peoples of these regions also had to learn Turkish, or all the 3 languages? I mean, the Arabs might have had it a little easier in that regard, but no. In fact, under Ottoman rule, these different peoples kept speaking their own languages. However, while communities could still use their native languages, all the actual imperial politics stuff still had to be done in Turkish. For this, many would have looked to their community's arzuhalci, or petition writer. Part of this can be explained by the millet system that the Ottomans used to rule their territories. Not to be confused with the millet system, that's a different thing. The system saw the empire's peoples divided into different groups based on religion, with each confessional group called a millet, and allowed to settle their own legal affairs and collect their own taxes on behalf of Constantinople. Within Constantinople and the empire's other major cities, you could also hear all these different languages being spoken on the streets. However, many of those living in the cities would have also learned Turkish as a second language for intergroup communication. You know what's really fascinating though? Well, hopefully all of this is, but Turkish wasn't always written in the Arabic script, as Greeks, Armenians, and Jews within the empire frequently used their own scripts to write Turkish. One example comes from the Karamanlis from south-central Anatolia, who were mainly Greek Orthodox, but generally spoke Turkish, though written in the Greek alphabet. The Karamanlis, or Karamanlites, are still around today, though they were all forced to move to Greece during the population exchange in 1923. The Ottoman Empire, as I'm sure you've gathered, worked nothing like the nation-state model we have in the modern world, where one people speaks one language in one nation. Except where it doesn't. Instead, it was more like several different nations, all under one Turkish empire. The empire went through radical changes over the 19th and early 20th centuries, particularly during the Tanzimat era. The Tanzimat, or reorganization, saw the Ottoman government transform itself from the inside out as a way to reverse its decline and catch up with industrial Western Europe. During this period of Westernization, French became a common language of science and diplomacy, a bit like Persian had been a few centuries earlier. However, the centralization of power also poked the hornet's nest that is the Balkans, stoking the flames of Balkan nationalism and ending in even more provinces declaring independence. Now, I don't want to paint any falsely rosy pictures of life under the Ottoman Empire, but I also wanted to show a different side, not just to this empire, but to the empires of the past. So, Storyblocks wanted me to make an ad for them and the sale they're currently doing for 15% off their annual plans. But the thing is, this whole video is kind of a Storyblocks ad. In fact, basically all my videos are. I've been using them since 2019 for my stock footage needs, and getting a subscription has been one of the best things I've done for this channel. Storyblocks has a massive library of not just stock footage, but also music, sound effects, and even After Effects templates with things like title animations and overlays. They even have a dedicated plugin for After Effects, Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, and Apple Motion. Everything available in Storyblocks is royalty-free and pre-licensed, and made by humans for humans. One single subscription grants you complete access to their entire catalog, with no limit on how many clips you can download and no need to worry about which clips you can and cannot actually use. And it's at a price that's actually affordable for more people, compared to other stock footage websites. I do occasionally get to use my own footage from my travels, but I can't travel everywhere for every single video I make, plus you can probably tell that I'm not that good of a cinematographer, which is why Storyblocks has been such a lifesaver. In fact, Storyblocks currently has a limited time offer for 15% off any of the annual plans if you go through storyblocks.com/KhAnubis or click the link below. Storyblocks was built with YouTube channels of all sizes in mind, so if you've ever wanted to make videos like I do, or just want to streamline your video editing process, now's your chance to save 15%.